where you can share your conflict situation.
Good afternoon and welcome to another amazing episode of Peace Zone with Peace Ambassadors on your favorite channel, KAFTAN TV Abuja. I want to ask my first question as always. How are you doing today? I hope you are peaceful with yourself, others and the environment despite all odds. I know you've been worried and hey, a lot of things have happened to you. But despite that, I want to believe that you are staying peaceful. Trust those of us that are in states we are preparing right now to go for the gubernatorial and state assemblies election. We are doing our best to go out there tomorrow and also exercise our civic right. On Peace Talk segment of Peace Zone today, we'll be looking at effective communication as a conflict management strategy. And joining us on this episode is my wonderful guest, Mr. Perry Tukwe Jr., a development communication specialist. And I just want to say, you're welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, Moses. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I'll still be bringing him back while we just go straight to the first segment of this show, which is where we talk about peace. And always remember that this show is an interactive one, and it gives you the opportunity to share your views on the discussion. So you can call on the studio line, which is +234 802993835, or you can also mail us on pzone2023@gmail.com. But you know that we might not be able to access all this, but do well and reach out to us so we can have a robust engagement. So once again, thank you for joining us on this episode of Peace Zone. And just like you know, I'm Moses Abolade, your peace building facilitator and host. And today I'll be doing this with my guests, and I'm sure that you are going to enjoy the best of it. We have had a whole lot of things that have happened, but there is a way we can communicate all our issues the right way. And I believe that we'll be looking deeply into this. The person we have too is a communication specialist, and he will be giving us a whole lot. He's going to be doing this with me, somebody I've known for a long time. Now, so let's get to it. What is communication itself? I'll be doing that before we will be talking about conflict communication, the role of effective communication in peace building. But before I go into that, let me just dive into it and discuss communication itself. So communication, as we know it, is the process of transferring or the process of transmitting information from one person to another. It is the art of sharing of ideas, facts, opinions, thoughts, messages, or emotions to other people with the use of any kind of channels you create to be able to create that mutual understanding and confidence. Well, communication is a two-way process wherein interchange of message connects the sender and the receiver. And I think my guest is already going back to his his communication classes to talk. He will be talking about some elements before we go in depth into communication and peace building. So I would just want to ask my guest to tell us a bit of what some of the elements of communication is, those like sender, like the encoder, those things, so that our audience can be well enlightened before we go into the real ocean.
Thank you so much, Moses. So, of course, you know, communication is a two-way sword. So the ideas, for example, you're conveying ideas, you're conveying particularly information, you know. You're conveying the information, of course, you're the sender, and then you're communicating it to someone else, and thus that person is the receiver. So there's also the means of communication. So you can communicate verbally, you can communicate through strategies, you can communicate, for example, you know, these days, with the upsurge in the use of the social media, you can also communicate through those channels. But another thing, for example, is the fact that for the communicator and the receiver, It has to be mediums that the both of them are actually on a common ground with.
Common ground.
That also can be replicated in ideas. For example, when you say you're passing a message, it means, number one, you are passing the right message in mediums that the receiver can actually understand. You might have the perfect message to communicate. You might have the perfect brochure to pass. But if the receiver is not in tune with what you're communicating, then there's going to be a gap.
Yeah.
So, for example, the best way to communicate might not be, and it's also relative. So, the best way to communicate with channel A will be very different from the best way to communicate with channel B. Of course, there's no universally accepted means of communication. But the idea is for you as a communicator, the channel with which you want to communicate is largely dependent on how the receiver is able to receive the message. So that's just the basics.
I really like the fact that you're able to, you just pieces everything around who is communicating the source, the message itself, the decoder, and the receiver, and every other types of communication in just few seconds. Thank you very much for that. So briefly, I'll be going into while we are even engaging in effective communication, because this is going to be a series, because communication is broad itself, but we'll be looking at why is communication important to peace building. Now, I will start some, then I will also get more from you. First, peace building is a social science that has to do with human interaction and engagement, and in this sense, that means people will definitely talk to one another. Definitely, when they exist, they will need to communicate, and that will lead to if they are carrying out a particular action or not. Now, conflict situations are often caused by miscommunication or inability to communicate in some integral part, and it's integral to peace building. Sometimes two people are fighting. Most times you just have to find out these people, if they did not talk, you will not be able to know what exactly is the root cause of this problem. The other one is when you're resolving conflict. Some resolving conflicts are dependent on how well the parties involved in that conflict can communicate. So when they are not communicating, how will you as a mediator, how will you be able to solve it? So I would also like to know more from your own professional aspect, why communication is so important to peace building.
I mean, that's a leveler. Communication is very strategic in peace building. So, for example, in peace building, I mean, before you want to build peace, I'm going to look at it from the spectrum of organizations, and then also implementation of policies, and how these policies also cascades down to ensuring that we, for example, want to increase or improve the livelihood of a particular community. So in peace building, for example, you have key actors. These key actors, of course, are people that you hold hands with to ensure that the sort of peace building strategy you want to implement will be one that will be tailored fit for the particular audience that you're going in for. So, for example, for peace building actors, you have the community people. The way that you would relate with the people at the community that you hope to strengthen their livelihood or improve their livelihood is very different from the way that you communicate with stakeholders. So, for example, in the new climb, there's a spectrum of peace building that says, for example, like you said, for peace building, if you want to go deep into conflict analysis and all, the strengths, the weaknesses, who are the key stakeholders, then you start to map all the stakeholders. The sort of language that you would communicate with stakeholders is quite different from the sort of language, that you communicate to these communities. When we look at it from all spectrums, we are seeing a situation whereby you made an illustration earlier of two people fighting. So in peace building right now, looking at it from what we call the common ground approach, it is saying the common ground approach. It is saying that, for example, we are going to be focusing on the things that will strengthen people together as against the adversaries. Yeah,
things that divides them. It might be too big.
So for some people, for example, in communication, you say when two parties are warring, the idea is you shed some, you sacrifice some,
like
so at the end of
compromise.
At the end of the day, you come together. But in the new realities of peace building and communication, there can be a win-win situation. You want to ask me why? Now, the reason is, we are going to dwell on the commonalities. No matter how two people have divergent views, there is a meeting point. There's a common ground. There'll be things that tie them together. In the new strands in peace building and communication, we are now going to be focusing ourselves. We're going to be fixing our gaze on those things that strengthen them and that brings people together instead of the things that would, that would wall them apart. So in simple parlance, it is the common ground approach looks at communication and peace building and saying we're taking it away from adversarial ways into collaborative efforts. So once we put our gaze on the things that strengthen us, then peace will hold sway. The question first arises, how are we now going to communicate the sort of things that would enable this collaborative effort?
Possibly, I know you have so much to talk on this, and possibly we will just go on a short break. And when we come back, we'll focus more on some questions that are prepared, mainly so that we can look at how communication itself affects either a conflict will be resolved or not. And we'll also be relating it to some issues in Nigeria right now, especially as it relates to the forthcoming gubernatorial and state assemblies election. So we'll go on a short break now, and when we come back, we'll be dealing with more of these issues. Thank you and stay tuned.
Professional peace ambassadors and PepNet, in collaboration with KAFTAN TV, presents Peace Zone with Peace Ambassadors.
And today is World Peace Day, and with us in the studio we have Moses Abolade, Peace Education and Practice Network Executive Director. Welcome to the studio with us, sir.
Thank you very much.
It is a weekly show designed to share peace knowledge and skills, discuss national, continental.
My name is Moses Abolade, the Executive Director and Peace Building Facilitator for Peace Education and Practice Network, PepNet. Dear Nigerians, in the past, the tension... You're welcome back from that short break, and this particular segment is what we call the Peace Building Convo, where I'm already interacting with our guest, who is Mr. Perry Tukuwe Jr. I love to call that your surname. And Mr. Perry Tukuwe Jr. is a development communication specialist, public policy, elections, and governance advisor. He has worked with different peace-building organizations and is an outstanding communication specialist, and that's why we're having him to discuss the role of effective communication. Know that effective communication in peace building. And I want to say welcome back again.
Thank you. Thank you for
my wonderful guest, and he has been giving us a whole lot exposure into what we have as why is communication important to peace building in resolving conflict. So, but before we go so fast, for some of people that might have missed the first aspect of our discussion, I want us to go back a bit to discuss what is effective communication itself. In the real sense of it, because our leadership, our duty bearers, peace builders themselves, or the normal Nigerian, I think we have seen a lot of reports on how miscommunication or how we communicate wrongly really affect us. So what exactly is an effective communication?
Effective communication in a straight balance means information that is intended to be conveyed is conveyed in the right channel, in the right message, to the right audience, in order to scale up the means by which the communication is intended to. It's just as simple as that. So for example, communication means I want to talk to you now.
Okay.
I am using the best channel possible that you can also relate with. Okay. I am also looking at you as the right audience to pass a message. So a message can be right, but can be wrong if it's passed to the wrong channel. So it's either an information I'm going to pass to you to a language that you will understand, to a medium that is easily accessible. Okay. Because for you, the receiver, there is the outcome of what that communication should do to you.
Yeah.
So it's either, for example, it's going to provoke change.
Okay.
It's going to mitigate violence.
Okay.
It's going to change stereotypes. So that's the end result of what that information I'm going to pass to you will be. So conveying that information, the questions that first arise is the fact that, number one, am I conveying it through the right channel? Am I conveying it through the right message? Are the end users, like of course you, the receiver, is able to receive this message in the best way possible? When once that is done, then we can click our glasses and breathe a sigh of relief and say, yes, we have engaged and we have actually, conveyed our message effectively in the most appropriate communication channel available.
So that leads us to also now go into what peace building is itself. The relationship that exists between an effective communication, which what you've said, that means you're saying the right thing through the right channel with the right content itself, received rightly by the person receiving. So now, how does this relate, all this what we are saying, right? How does it relate to peace building itself? And if possible, you can also still go into what peace building is itself. Yeah,
I mean, it relates a lot to peace building. Yeah, you can't talk about peace building, for example, looking at it from activities of CSOs, INGOs, and not locate that discussing the role that effective communication plays. So, for example, if you're going to, we implemented Search for Common Ground, for example, implemented a project in the Niger Delta that had to do with, strengthening the capacity of the local people, to respond positively and also douse the tension around the farmer-herder conflict, in these communities. So, for example, one of the messages that we used to convey such information was through the media. I mean, that the media also,
or the show, the new.
So the media, of course, we can break it down.
Yeah,
there's radio, there's television, there's the social media. Then there's also what we call transformative media channels.
True.
So they can, for example, not be on TV or on social media, but we have examples like participatory theater.
Yeah.
We have examples like, for example, local film screening.
Yes, that people come out.
That people will come together. So, for example, you want to communicate effectively, you have to do, in conflict, you do a conflict scan. But for that, you have to probably do like a communication scan.
Yeah.
Do like a survey. You can't rule. In peace building, you can't rule DML out. You can't rule the design. You can't rule monitoring. You can't rule evaluation and learning. So you have the meal spectrum is very important. So, for example, you have to go there in a particular community, for example, and say, what sort of medium do you guys receive information?
Okay. Now,
so you don't go to the village, to a local village, for example, in a rural community, and tell them to tune in to CNN at 5 p.m. or to tune in to one of the big media outlets.
They will ask you questions.
They will ask you questions like, we don't have, a lot of us do not have televisions here. A lot of us, for example, too, might not have access to radio here. So what's the channel that is most effective to pass your message? So that brings us also to the part that if we look at the cord that drives effective communication and peace building together, you might have the wonderful message, wonderful information, well scripted, is in the brochure. By the end of the day, you try to pass that message, you're not seeing the intended outcome because it was conveyed to a channel that the receiver, for example, people in the rural communities, might not be able to decipher or might not be able to understand. So, for example, let's talk about, going to implement activities in rural communities. Yeah. The best way is the transformational dialogue. Participatory theater, for example.
Those things that bring people to come physically and see themselves and feel like, oh, we are part of this.
So you can use radio dramas also, for example, if the audience in a particular...
if they will listen.
Yes, if you know that, for example, you do a scan and find out that, okay, so in this particular social milieu, the audience here listen a lot to radio. So you put your channel there. So the first thing is finding a medium to pass your message. Finding a medium to pass your message, that's the underlying factor. Once that is communicated, then that also serves the purpose. But you want to expand this discourse into governance also.
Yes, that's even where we are going right now, to discuss that, looking at the way policymakers make we are still experiencing cash crunch. I don't know if you experienced it.
Of
like
course
you know, so we have different classes of Nigerians.
I mean everybody is in it.
So you know, a lot of people have talked about the communication of the policy. We will pick that. Well, that's one. There's election tomorrow. How is the umpires? How are they passing their communication, and how does it affect peace building processes in an entire circle? How does this all play out? Why is it that how is communication so important, so that people might not go this, even if they are going through stress, they will understand why they are going through this. So I would like you to buttress on that when it comes to the issue of Nigeria policy making, democratic governance, and what have you.
So I'm just going to use a question from use an example from the Buhari administration before, of course, I go deeper into it. So, for example, there have been a lot of gains. I don't speak for the government, but I know that there have been a lot of gains in spite of the odds that this administration might have made.
Okay.
But for a lot of people might not even see it.
Okay.
So the problem now shows that there's a gap.
In communication.
In communication. So that, of course, has necessitated, if you look at it, for example, there's a website that has been created to say, okay, all of the projects of this administration has been dozied in. But you still ask the question, do the people in the rural communities have access to internet services to go through your website?
Find out.
Or who have, data-enabled phones to even find out? So in talking about this, we are also seeing the gap that is inherent. So, for example, also, when the INEC added very laudable initiatives in order to strengthen our electoral management system, how was this communication conveyed?
How
was it
communication conveyed?
To ensure that in the over 160,000 polling units in the country, everyone was abreast of the development. How, of course, it was, I can tell you as a communication specialist, that it was it was after the presidential election that a lot of people found out that you can actually, for example, upload results from your polling unit to the IRF. A lot of people also, till now, as I speak to you, cannot even differentiate between the beavers and the IRF.
Based on the channel of communication.
Yeah, so you would now ask ourselves that question. How did INEC go up with this advocacy? What sort of channels did they use that has created this gap in communication?
I know there's a whole lot of questions to be answered, or to be asked. There's a whole lot of questions to be asked and to be answered too if we keep. But I just want us to wrap up this session with knowing what we can do right now at this point when it comes to our communication. How can we strengthen our communication to make it more effective, especially when it comes to issues around those things we mentioned, policy making? Leaders, when they come out, we should be able to, you know, something that really struck a lot of people with the cash crunch: different information by different organs of government, and people cannot even know what is truth. Even till this morning, I still have conversation around it that people were saying they are still waiting for a presidential order on what has been. Do you understand? So how can we actually strengthen that communication gap that we already perceived, or that we think that exists right now?
Strengthening the communication gap is akin to using mediums that are in tune with the current realities to drive messages in order to meet its intended outcome. So, for example, a communication strategy is not all-encompassing. It is relative. The way that you pass a message to people living in Jigawa will be quite different from the way that you pass a message in those that live in urban areas in the FCT.
Oh.
So you have to find ways, understanding the context, understanding the terms of reference around this environment also goes a long way to actually capture.
I think we will just have to hand it on the understanding that context of of where we are carrying out anything we are doing. I think we will still have to have this conversation going forward. I know Mr. Perry Tukure is always ready to give us a whole lot when it comes to issues around communication and peace building. And I want to say a special thanks. I want to say special appreciation goes to you, Mr. Perry, for joining us physically on this show. I want to say thank you very much. And for taking out your time and expertise to deliver on this, we really want to say thank you very much. We hope you will be joining us again when next we have to call you for something similar like this, to continue the part 2 of this. Thank you very much. And I want to say please and please, for sponsorship and partnership, try and reach out to us either from our email or through +234 8109661910. And I want to say deepest appreciation. Our deepest appreciation goes to KAFTAN TV management and production crew, Abuja, the management and P-Zone and of PepNet in general. We want to say we appreciate all peace ambassadors across the globe doing what they should be doing. We want to say thank you very much. Till we appear on your screen again next time, same station, for another edition of P-Zone, please stay safe, stay peaceful, and stay developed. Bye for now.